Hi, everybody. Sorry I'm a couple minutes late. I was on the phone and not paying attention to the time, so didn't see that it was 1 o'clock. Live time. So just waiting. See some people get on here. And Christy's already here. Yay, Christy. Oh, since I was on the phone, Christy, I was going to grab my Mad Hatter hat for this and forgot. It's on the phone discussing political drama stuff. I was like, oh crap, it's 1 o'clock. And I've got borderline migraine. So I don't know how long I'll be on for sure. Hello, people saying hello. Good, such a headache. So this live was scheduled before we knew that Kathleen was going live yesterday. And hello to Italy. I scheduled this one only because every other one that I do is always a 6 p.m. my time, which is 5 hours from now. And for people in the other time zones, it made them have to stay up really late. So I was like, all right, I'll go on early one day so other people can participate. And I guess I should start off with my name is Jax West. I am not related to the family. I'm not associated with the family. I am just a supporter. That's it. I'm not a legal expert. I do not visit Stephen. I talk to him on the phone on occasion. I'm not one of the girls that get a regular weekly call from Stephen. He just knows whenever he'd like to talk to me, he can give me a call. So that's me. Hello all around the world. So let's summarize. We were live yesterday on Stephen Avery Project because Kathleen was live on her Twitter. And somebody in this group had asked if we were going to go live, and I hadn't thought anything of that until they had said it, that there's a lot of people who don't do Twitter, myself included. I don't really do Twitter. So we went live to read what she was posting as it came in for people who don't have it. And then the screenshots have been posted as well. Yeah, no hat today. Samantha's asking, what's the update? Has she filed anything? No, nothing's going to be filed until December 20th, so she says. But I don't think she has to wait until the 20th to file. I think maybe that's the deadline. I'm not sure. So she might drop it like it's an album. She might drop it before that, but she's the one that keeps saying December 20th. So she'll be filing it right before the holiday. Okay, and Christy says she posted all the screenshots here last night and they should be in chronological order. To summarize, I know there were people that thought that there was going to be some big news she was dropping. I mean, we did get some new tidbits, but it was just the opportunity to do another Q&A with Zellner, which I think it's a great opportunity for those of, the people that follow the case. So, she's not going to just give us everything she's got, because look at every time she has filed something, then the state reopens something, and that's when they re-question Bobby and Barb and Scott, so you don't want to give them too much of a heads up on stuff. So she drops us a little bit. And so what we learned yesterday, that to my knowledge is new. I know things have been said before about the RAV4 battery. And now remember, that's something that Sweaty Sweat Sweat really wanted to point out, is the sweat DNA that was found on the hood latch. And so they had said that Stephen had disconnected the battery. So if somebody had her key fob, they couldn't hit, the alarm or the panic or, any of that stuff. So Sweaty Sweat Sweat is the one that was doing, his offense is a good defense or whatever, by going right away and saying that Stephen had touched the battery. And it's not something that Stephen's original lawyers ever looked into. And so what Kathleen said yesterday, her theory is that Teresa's battery had died, and in order for police, I need to stop saying police because it's the sheriff's department, not the police department. So the sheriff's department, or let's just say Colborne, to move the RAV4 from Cuss Road to the salvage yard, they needed to get a battery in there. So they got a battery out of a Crown Victoria, which is here in the States is a common police vehicle and sheriff's department vehicle. And so it's not the right battery for the RAV4, but batteries, there's only X amount of batteries and they'll work multiple cars. But so that Crown Vic battery is what is in evidence in photos being in the RAV4. And batteries all have a serial number on it. And so apparently Kathleen has traced that on who owned that battery. So, we're just here theorizing that that's going to be Manitowoc Sheriff's Department car. And there are pictures posted here in Gossip on it. Emma says, any updated posts from the other page or Barb? And people saying, has anybody heard from Barb? I don't think anybody's going to hear too much from Barb. She takes all of November off of work, her and Scott both, to go hunting because they like to go kill things. So she's out doing a whole lot of, murdering animals. So all we know about Barb is the latest fight she just had with Brad Dassey, which that was a whole mess that we here at Stephen Avery Project and Gossip want no part of at this point. Of they hate each other, they're going to make up and apologize and hate each other and make, so whatever. But so Barb just does the usual Barb stuff where she wants to spam everywhere she can to say that they're all innocent. So that's all I've heard about from that and the 11 billion fundraisers. Danielle says Bobby's name is all over news here in Sheboygan, and I can't ever see Sheboygan and not think of what's the comedian Jerry Lewis. Sheboygan. Yeah, good. Let the pressure be on Bobby. Replies, people asking what they're saying on the news, and Danielle says that he is the suspect that framed Stephen and Brendan. Yeah, and that's, obviously Kathleen in those tweets, she never comes out and says Bobby's the killer, but you can tell by the things that she's saying that that's who their suspect is. So she also said yesterday that when asked what the motive was, she said, I can't remember how she worded it, but it was anger due to, how did she word it? But it's basically like he made a move on Teresa and she turned him down, his sexual advances or whatever. So that again is pointing squarely at Bobby. Bobby is the one that knew Stephen's finger had been cut open again on the night that Stephen, thank you, Christy, rage fueled by rejection is the way it is worded. He knew that Stephen's finger had come open again when Stephen and Chuck, was it Stephen and Chuck were going to go to Menards or whatever? And Stephen had gone in real quick to put a Band-Aid on and left with Chuck. And then that's when Stephen knew blood had been on the sink, but he didn't clean it up, left and went with Chuck. And then the next morning when he got up, he, noticed the blood was no longer there. So Bobby clearly knew he was bleeding, and that if there was blood in the bathroom, that would be Stephen's blood. And so Kathleen's theory is saying that it was Bobby that then got into Stephen's trailer, got the blood, and then went to the RAV and planted it in the RAV. And the RAV was at Cuss Road. That's where it was left. And when you look at, we've had the picture posted in here before, on the salvage yard is not far from where the RAV4 was. To drive there, you have to drive around all these fields. But if you were on foot, as the crow flies, it's not far. So Kathleen's theory is that Bobby planted the blood there because he knew that was Stephen's, and obviously he knows it's not going to be Teresa's because he killed Teresa, so he knows any blood in Stephen's trailer is not going to be Teresa's. Then when Colborn finds the RAV4 at Cuss Road, when it had been reported to him by the guy at the convenience store, the gas station or whatever it was, they don't have access inside the RAV. They don't know anything about the blood that's in it upon first seeing it until they get access in there by contacting either Teresa's brother or, Scott Blodorn or Ryan Hilgas, or all three, if they just showed up at that place and all three of those boys were there and got the spare key. And then when you get in the vehicle at that point, you see the blood there. They don't know who murdered Teresa or what happened to Teresa. They know nothing. They just have her vehicle and there's blood there. As far as Colborn, Lank, the Teresa's brother, Scott Blodorn, and Ryan Hilgas would think at that point it's Stephen. And they wanted to make sure that this evidence would be back at the salvage yard because Stephen was guilty. In that flash of and then them thinking that because of the prior false conviction and the deposition started, that no, it would be taken seriously and Stephen would walk. So if you're not one of the people that think that law enforcement was a part of this the entire time, I still just can't get with that. Manitowoc Sheriff's Department is horrible. I don't see them planning a hit on some young innocent woman for this. I don't see that. I see them as taking advantage of a situation, not we're going to set up some innocent girl to die. I just can't see that. So, but then they're also going to just go full force with that narrative. So they're never looking at any other evidence to find out who really did it because they don't care. Because Stephen being guilty helps them. So, and once you get that ball rolling, you're not going back from it. So, all right, let me scroll through. Okay, so this is people talking more about what the news is talking about in Wisconsin. And there's people telling rage from rejection. Yeah. Lauren says, have you got any new hearing set yet? No. Again, it's Kathleen has to file. She'll be filing on December 20th. And then the state will have X amount of time to respond to that. And then the court has X amount of time to then rule on that. So we're still a ways away. Sienna says, didn't she say with help from Scott after the fact? Yes, she does talk about Scott in a couple different things, and even the recreation that she has posted that you can find on YouTube, and we have here as well. It's showing Scott's there helping move Teresa. Then you have the whole Sikaki letter thing that she's theorizing that it came from somebody who worked the same shift that Scott did at the smelter, at the foundry, and that they're all illiterate there and don't know how. So Sikaki is how this illiterate person spelled out skinny, which is his nickname. So, but also she talked about how Scott claimed that he went and visited his mother in the hospital in Green Bay in the morning, then came back, went hunting, picked up Barb at 5, and then went back to Green Bay Hospital. But a couple witnesses saw Scott at that trailer, at Barb's trailer during the day. Barb's at work. The only people home at that time are people who are working the salvage yard and Bobby. So why was Scott at Bobby's house when he's testifying in court that he was at the hospital with his mother, who he's physically assaulted in the past? And that we have something that I don't know if I hadn't heard before or my dumbness just didn't pick up on it. But we've always had that voicemail from Teresa Halbach asking for directions, which never made sense because she's been out to the Avery salvage yard several times. And so it's, so people have always wondered about that, thinking, okay, was it that message really for the Zipper's house? What was that? So now what Kathleen was saying yesterday, and correct me if I'm wrong at how I'm interpreting what was said, is that, one, since this car is Barbara's vehicle and the title's in Barbara's name, when the initial appointment is made, it is made for B. Yanda, right? And so now, probably when Stephen made the appointment, because Stephen's the one that made the original appointment, he didn't give address because he's probably not thinking that by saying Yanda, they don't realize salvage yard. So now when Teresa was going out on her appointments for the day, she realized she doesn't know where Yanda is. And so she was calling and asking for the directions on how to get there. And then somebody at that time, when both Bobby and Scott were there, contacted Teresa and gave her the directions. So Emma says, hope Bobby soon never sees the outside world again till he dies. Yeah. Danielle says, honestly, I feel Bobby may kill himself before getting tried. I heard he has tried to commit suicide multiple times. Yeah, I've heard a couple people mention that. People replying. Emma says, maybe he'll plead mentally unstable. I think that could have been a defense at the time, I suppose. but because of the cover-up and everything since, and as one of the family minions was so desperate to try and point out yesterday in the Twitter Q&A, going, oh, but look, Bobby's living just his best life now with a wife and children, and, you know, oh, he couldn't have possibly have done that because, you know, it's not like, what's his face? John Wayne Gacy from this area, you know, he had a wife and a kid, and he was murdering people, you know, so just because you have a family doesn't mean you're not a sick, twisted killer. That's just a dumb thing to try and point out. Danielle says, I feel Scott will go down and maybe even Barb for withholding. I don't know truly what Barb knows, if anything. She may be intentionally living in the dark. You know, fingers in the ear, la, 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 I can't hear you. She has to suspect, if nothing else. And she did try to get that computer wiped. Why did she try to get that computer wiped? So, you know, no need to wipe a computer that's not even connected to the internet, right, Barb? Chelsea says, does anyone know how many burn barrels were on the property? Asking because my husband brought it up last night when I was reading Kathleen's tweets to him. I have pictures of burn barrels from one of my visits there. Obviously, that's, you know, not current. But, you know, so each residence have a burn barrel that's near. And then they also had one that were by that Avery Road. I think each residence had like 2 or 3 burn barrels. And for those of you who don't understand, you know, that you're not from that area and don't get what burn barrels are, where the Averys live, they do not have garbage pickup. You know, they don't have put your cans out at the curb and a garbage man comes and takes your stuff. So they have to physically drive their garbage to a dump. And so, which I know from my years of spending my summer up in northern Wisconsin is something that, you know, all of us fibs, as they call us, Wisconsin people call Illinois people fibs, they call it, which stands for fucking Illinois bastards. When all of us fibs go there, it's like, ooh, we want to go to the dump because that's when you can see the black bear come and eat all the garbage at the dump, and you sit in your car and watch the bears. So you burn what you can, so you don't have to constantly be driving to the dump because that's a pain in the ass. So you'll have multiple burn barrels. So I think each of them had like 3 burn barrels. And now people's questions have been pushed up, so I can't get back to them. Emma says they concluded death very fast, didn't they? Yeah, actually, there was a death certificate. Wasn't the death certificate issued before they even found her? Yeah. Oh, and now it just scrolled and missed the rest of it. And the rest of your comments was before bones found. Yeah. So a death certificate was issued right away. Sienna says, being so obsessed with Saw, I just watched Jigsaw a few days ago, and all the stuff he has Googled on murder and whatnot. It doesn't surprise me, it just booted up, that he would think to get, and it now went up and I can't read the rest of it. So I think what they were trying to say is, you know, people try to say Bobby wouldn't be smart enough to go get his blood implanted. And I don't know Bobby. I've never met Bobby, but Bobby is not Brendan, you know, so I'm not saying he's the smartest person in the world, but he's not Brendan, and I will leave that at that. Carrie, most of her thing is missing here, but she's bringing up the serial killer. That, yeah, because again, when the minion was trying so desperately to point finger away from Bobby, and you know he's this good family man, Zellner used the term that plenty of serial killers have families, and so that has gotten people looking once again at would this really be Bobby's only murder? So there are other cases of missing women up there. So I don't know. Kim says, why isn't anyone with a metal detector looking for her original keys? Probably has killer's prints. Ooh, Paul Kaluzinski has 2 metal detectors. Maybe I should bring him up there and we go look. Amber says, the cops were mad because Stephen got that money from the first case and that made them mad. Stephen did not get money. They were in the deposition phase for it. So due to this, he had to settle. So yeah, they were mad because they didn't want to have to pay him the $36 million. Claire says, how did Ryan get the planner? Did KZ address this? I didn't see if she did. The theory is Colborn finds the RAV4 at Coast Road. It's locked, no keys. So they go to Teresa's house, get the spare key from there, the valet key, get the car opened up. Her day planner's in the car. That's how Ryan then has the day planner. So they called Ryan, and Ryan came and brought them the key and then had the day planner. Chris says, that doesn't add up. I could swear I saw an appointment slip that had the address. Oh, you're saying for Beyonda? Well, because she did talk to somebody somehow that did tell them where to go for theirs. So was it that Teresa wrote it down after that day on the phone? Arlene says, if Bobby does this, can still get presented for Stephen release. It needs to be proven, is what Kathleen said yesterday. Arlene says, makes you wonder how many times he has done this before, and this is his first catch. Correct. Sienna says, Ted Bundy was engaged in totally normal, right? Yeah. Arlene says, Lori Deppes is still missing. She kind of looks like her. Chelsea says, do you think that the conversation between Scott, Barb, and Stephen that was in the second half of the show will be used in court? If she's allowed to, yes. I'm sure the state will, the state's going to try and block any of the evidence that Kathleen has. So, if the court doesn't rule in the state's favor, I think she absolutely will use it. Chris says, the slip from Auto Trader said Beyonda and the address, as I recall seeing. Well, maybe it's on StephenAveryCase.org. That's where all the documents and exhibits are. So, Chris, if you want to check, that would be my suggestion of where to go to see if you can find that. Pam says, I was wondering if maybe Bobby and Teresa were chatting on MySpace. Yeah, because Kathleen said something about that was contacted in some way, but not by phone. But also something that was instant messenger was used a lot on that computer. Arlene says they said 4 barrels. Emma says Barb is definitely involved somehow. Taylor says it makes sense. Stephen called her because he didn't know when she was coming because the message went to the Dassey's phone. Bingo. John says, why does Barb keep going on about being declared bankrupt? Does her and Scott have something to hide? Well, because there's a lot of suspicion about that. Of when they claim bankruptcy, Barb sold her trailer to Chuck, and they claim bankruptcy, and then they're able to, and they buy a new house. It's the same day that Scott testified, right? So they're claiming bankruptcy, and miraculously all their debts are paid off. Scott always has medical debt of some kind, and then unemployment debt from his constantly trying to manipulate the system so he doesn't have to work and get paid to be home. So yeah, it's that they doth protest too much. You know, the more she keeps trying to bring up this bankruptcy, the more it looks suspicious. A bunch of replies. Christy Lynn says, how does KZ know that Bobby was trying it on with her before her death? Does she have proof? I assume Kathleen doesn't say anything without the receipts to back it up. She knows what she's doing, you know, and she's not going to throw something out there unless she can back it up, or else it's a fishing expedition. There's always that case too. Mindy says, so KZ's theory is that Bobby did it and moved the car. Then the witness saw the car and reported to Colborn. Do we still think Colborn moved the car, replaced battery, and moved it to salvage yard? Yes. So basically, two sets of people framed Stephen without knowledge of each other's participation of events, if that makes sense. Makes perfect sense, because yes, that's what it is. Bobby is desperate to get this stuff away from him and make it so Stephen looks guilty. Then when law enforcement finds it, they want to make sure Stephen looks guilty, get it back to the property. So, yeah. One hand wasn't washing the other. They were separate. John says, what time did the bus driver say she was at the property and saw that she testified to? Doesn't it make her story completely false? John, that's a video that I have that I took where I wore a bright orange shirt and I stood where the red van was, and I even brought my camera and was holding a camera, and my partner was down at the bus stop, which is down by the office where the mailboxes are. And so first it's zoomed in and you see me there, and then he zooms out so you would see it as your eye would see it from there, and you can't tell what color my shirt is, nothing. There is no way possible the bus driver saw Teresa Halbach taking pictures of that red van. So one of my earlier theories had been Bobby got her down by the bus stop for a hustle shot of his Blazer, and that the bus driver then saw her taking pictures of the Blazer, not of the red van. But everything that Zellner has put out says something completely different. Somebody should really find that bus driver and talk to her on exactly what she saw and where she saw it, because from the bus stop, there is no way she saw Teresa Halbach. I don't care what time she was there. And I get it that the defense had used her because a bus driver is going to be at the same place every day at the same time about. So it's how you can really get a time of the event. But nobody looked into the fact that there's no way that bus driver could see that far down that road. Not possible. So why the bus driver had a false testimony, I don't know. Somebody needs to talk to that bus driver. Trish says, what was the file on the computer named Teresa DNA? We don't know. only been told that there were these different files with those different titles. Arlene says, I think he was thinking if he put the planner back at her place, it had Stephen Avery name on it to prove he saw her last. That's a good point. Adam says, what this all about, please? It's just the case in general. No new news. Just we do these live discussions because people like to chat about it in live time. That's all it is. Pam says, death certificate also stated there was an autopsy performed. How do you autopsy a few bones? Right. Yeah, there's just so much wrong with this case. Emma says, it was well thought out enough to think there's more he's responsible for. Adam says, recap, please. Recap is I'm just going over the people's questions and answering them. So there's no real recap to go over. But this, when this video is done being live, it stays posted here and you can watch it from the start if you want. Arlene says, Bobby hates Stephen. So once he killed Teresa, the cops did the rest. Yeah. Well, a theory is that everybody knew of that lawsuit that Stephen was embroiled in. And I know this may shock people, but family wanted pieces of that money. So somebody who's not knowledgeable on things could think that if Stephen went to prison, that case would continue and then family would have control of that money, of that $36 million. And, you know, what's Stephen going to do with $36 million in prison for murder? So, yeah, I'm sure people here would be shocked to hear, you know, family making money, the most important thing in the case. Replies. Luann, I just got here. I want the hat. Danielle said Keys probably went into smelter. Yeah, that's a good idea or good thought. Amber says, oh, okay, I wasn't sure if he even got it, but that's what I thought. Connie says, Jax, if you do go to Cuss Road or where Scott's old trailer was, my gut still says Scott's old trailer. Yeah, I am planning on going up there. I won't say when because I have people not too fond of me. So I don't want people to know when I'm there for my own protection. But I will take videos and such when I'm there and share them with y'all after the fact. Chris says he did get $400K, which is what he paid his lawyer with. Correct. Emma says, I want the Mad Hatter hat. Alice in Wonderland is my fave, LOL. I have a tattoo of We're All Mad Here, the hat and Alice. One of my legs is tattooed with all Wizard of Oz, and my other leg is going to be all Alice in Wonderland. Tara says, I asked yesterday what you think KZ's intention was to tweet that info out to everyone. You thought I asked what you get out of these videos, LOL. Oh, okay. Not sure what benefit it is to let the other side know what she is doing. I think it's, Tara, I think it's a cat and mouse game. Oh, and that's funny because now somebody just literally sent me a video of these cats doing all this funny stuff, I guess, for some reason. Maybe I look like a crazy cat lady. I think she does it as cat and mouse. She does it because it fleshes out more witnesses. Because we here at Stephen Avery Project, we've had people reach out to us that say they now want to come forward. And then and if there's anybody watching this now who is going to say the same thing and want to come forward, don't come forward to me. Go directly to Kathleen. You know, I mean, I'm nosy. I, would love to know what the stuff is, but you got to do the proper protocol or whatever, and just go right to Kathleen. They prefer you to email it. So, I know people will say I've called and she doesn't return my calls, because she doesn't. Just because you call, you're not necessarily going to get a call back. She doesn't do that with clients. She doesn't. She's busy. But they also like everything just to be in writing. So you can go to Kathleen Zellner's website, and then there's listed on there, she's got a special email address just for Stephen Avery tips. Paul Kalosinski. Paul knew I was going live today too, and I already talked to him this morning. I think she releases some of this stuff. It puts the heat on. I've always hoped by her doing this, it would get Scott Blodorn, because he seems to be, in my opinion, the least involved in it. So go to KZ, make your immunity deal, talk about how you guys brought the key and knew the car was planted, So I think that's why she does it. Oh, okay. Stormy says, so you think Ryan already had the planner? I only think Ryan had the planner after bringing the key to Cuss Road. And then they opened up the vehicle to see what they could find in there. And then that's where they got the planner. But like somebody else just said, which is a good point, you would want that planner now back at her house, not in her car, since it has her writing on it and such. What is that I just got an invite for? Adam keeps asking me to recap, but as I've said, I don't know what you want me to recap. If you're asking me to just recap this, I'm just going over people's questions and answering them. So you can play this again afterwards from the start if you want. John says, do you think Scott rules what Barb does and say and has something on her to keep her quiet? It's a difficult relationship because while Barb is not just all walked over, she does stand up for herself in some ways to Scott. It is still like anytime you went to talk to Barb, it would be on speakerphone and Scott has to be right there listening the whole time. And she's constantly trying to make him happy. He does things like he knows how long it takes her to drive from work to get home. And if she's not home in such and such a time, he's now questioning, where were you? Where'd you go? So, and what would he have over her? Well, he has over her that he knows that her son murdered Teresa Hallback, in my opinion. So he would have that to hold over her. And then also, as long as they're married, you can't force a spouse to testify against a spouse. Debbie says, with the RAV4 being a big part of evidence and when KZ can get it, I fear the officers involved in planting of evidence that they will do something to that vehicle before it is released to KZ. Yeah. I don't know that what she'll really be able to get there. I know she really wanted to look at that broken taillight. She's already stated the blood that's in there. There's really nothing she can do with that blood at this point with how old it is to detect and use that stuff. She was more concerned with the busted taillight. And then also there were fingerprints that were never cross-checked that were on that vehicle. The only thing that we do know is Stephen and Brendan's fingerprints weren't on it. Heather is telling me read replies. Katya says, filing for bankruptcy, but then having money to buy a new house, fishy. Yeah. Taylor says, what is your opinion on Wiegert asking Toyota about the car battery 9 months after the car was found? Any theory? Yeah, I did hear, I don't have a theory on it. I just heard something on that yesterday and haven't really thought about it. My mind is pretty not sure what direction to focus on. Like today, one of the things I did is I was like, ooh, I wonder if that picture of Carl, I can't remember if the name's Wardman or Wardsman, one of the jury members who was also Manitowoc Sheriff's Community Service Officer. Like, ooh, I wonder if that picture that we've seen a million times of him, if that was a Crown Vic. And so I pulled that up and it's not a Crown Vic. But then I just Googled Manitowoc Sheriff's Department vehicles, and then you find the Crown Vic. And then one of the moderators here found the picture of where you see Stephen Avery, and then in the background is a Crown Vic Manitowoc Sheriff's Department vehicle. So I don't have a theory on that yet. If somebody else has a theory for that, please let me know. Emma says, wouldn't filing for bankruptcy falsely be a crime? Yeah, there's something sketch about that bankruptcy. You just don't know exactly what it is. Oh, one of the moderators said the bus driver wasn't 100% sure on the day. Correct. She did say that she wasn't sure what day she had seen Teresa taking a picture of the vehicle. So that's the thing too, is a lot of times when Stephen was selling cars that Teresa came and took pictures of, they were parked down by the bus stop because they were parked down by the office. So she could have seen a different day because Teresa had been there, 2 weeks before Halloween to photograph something else. So it could have been then. So that's why, again, I go, why hasn't people talked to that bus driver to find out where was the car? Because when she was asked about the car, she just said something about, she just said it was a piece of junk. And she didn't believe somebody would be selling it or something like that. And so I've got so many questions about that bus driver. Connie said, so maybe if it was done at the bus stop, wasn't Brendan getting off that bus? Maybe his stuttering was because he was trying to cover his brother and blame Stephen, trying to switch the info, his mind with his slow thinking. Connie, I stay firm on, I don't think Brendan knows anything about this whatsoever. Not covering for Bobby or Scott or Stephen or anything. I do not think Brendan would be able to live with himself had he known this stuff, that he wouldn't be able to lie like this. I just don't see it in that kid that he'd be able to. I think his first story that he told the police of just getting off the bus and walking home and playing video games, he didn't get Stephen's mail. The Stephen's mail thing is something that the Wiegert and Fassbender keep pushing him because they want him to have some kind of connection with Stephen. He didn't get Stephen's mail, because there was another thing that was said that Dolores usually would get the mail. And then Stephen would have lunch with Dolores and Dolores would give Stephen his mail then, right? Or was it dinner that because he would have lunch and dinner with his mom. So I don't think Brendan saw or knew anything. I think Brendan got off the bus, went home, played video games. I don't think Brendan saw or knows anything. Betty says, do we know who bought the battery? No, but Kathleen does. Kelly says, why does Bobby hate Stephen? And Bex also said, do we know why Bobby hates Steve? Gonna be blunt. All right. Stephen wasn't nice. He wasn't nice to the people in the family. Why was he not nice? Well, he had been in prison for 18 years for something he didn't do, and they dropped him. Nobody gave a shit about Stephen except for his parents and occasionally Barb for the 18 years he was in prison. Oh, I should say his cousin Kim Ducat, or Ducat, however you say her name. She's always been supportive of Stephen as well. Nobody else was. And Stephen's going to hold that against him. Maybe he's not nice to him all the time. I don't blame him. You know, because there were people in his family, that brothers and stuff, that they were saying he was guilty in the Penny Bernstein case. So when he was free those 2 years, you know, and also family wasn't looking to help him when he got out, because remember hearing him talking about at one point he was living in a ice shanty because he had no place to stay. So he wasn't always the nicest to them. So they didn't like him. But they tolerated him because, as I was told personally by a family member, they wanted a piece of his money. So they were taking being treated like shit because they wanted part of that $36 million payday. And so Stephen then knows these people got to eat my shit. So that's why Bobby hated Stephen. And so did several of the family members, because Stephen wasn't nice to him. But guess what? They deserved it. Sienna says family is still trying to get pieces of their money. Yes. David says money will split up family, friends, relationships, etc. Yes. Chanda says, wow, but that sounds about right. Connie says they also wanted him out of the family business too, correct? Yes. Chuck and Earl did not want to split the salvage yard with Stephen. Zena says Barbara is really fishy. Kimberly says, oh my God, didn't even think of the family wanting his money. Betty says, is Bobby and Barb still together? Do you mean Scott and Bob? Because Scott and Barb are married and Bobby is Barb's son. So Scott and Barb are still together. Emma says, Bobby and Scott sound like they believe that they'd still get money from Stephen. That's what I think. Arlene says, somehow I don't think the killing was planned. That was always my theory, is that, you know, he asked her to pull over for, you know, the hustle shot and then made whatever move on her. And she turned him down. And then that's when that happened. I don't think he planned in advance that when she gets here today, I'm going to kill her. I think he might have planned because he knew she was coming. He absolutely knew she was coming ahead of time, because the entire salvage yard knew she was coming that day to take pictures of Barb's car. And the boys were told to clean out that car for the pictures. And the boys were also upset because they didn't want their mom selling that car, because it had been promised to them that they could use it as another car for them to use. So, I don't think it was planned. I think it was a moment of rage or passion or whatever you want to call it. John says, going off track, how was your nephew's musical last night? Very good. Yeah, I went to my nephew's Music Man, and he was part of the Barbershop Quartet. So it was a good time. Thank you for asking. Arlene says, I think it was something that went wrong and everyone was involved against Stephen, except Stephen. I don't think, I think it was just Bobby and Scott that were involved. I don't think anybody else in the family had any part in it whatsoever. And I don't think Barb knew about it. There's two different options for Barb there. Either she knew something was going on and she was led to believe that, you know, I mean, Stephen obviously is expendable. They're happy to be rid of Stephen. And so originally thinking that this was going to all go on Stephen, that's all good. Then when Brendan got dragged into it, since Brendan was Stephen's alibi, there's no going back from that then, and that she felt it was acceptable to let Brendan pay for Bobby's crime because of him being 16 and low IQ, that he would be charged as a juvenile and be out in 2 years, as opposed to Bobby was 18 and he'd be doing the time that Brendan is now doing. So either Barb knew ahead of time, not ahead of time like she's part of the murder, but she knew when court was happening, or she has to know something now. Replies. Emma says, how is Melissa's family? Thank you for asking about Melissa. For those that don't know, Melissa Kaluzinski is another one of Kathleen Zellner's cases that I advocate for as well. Paul, her father, has a couple different things in motion because he, wants to do everything he can to help his daughter. We are planning on going to visit Melissa Friday next week, the day after Thanksgiving, because her mom, Cheryl, will be off of work that day. And typically they only go to visit Melissa on the weekend because Cheryl's off of work. But we learned the last time we went to the prison and visited Melissa, she told us that they're now doing photographs at the prison, and they only do them on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays at 2 p.m., which I think is a totally shitty thing for the prison to do, knowing that a lot of people can't go on weekdays to the prison. They can only go on the weekend. It's a 3-hour drive to get down to Southern Illinois to her prison. Because, they don't put you in a prison that's necessarily close to where your family lived. They don't care about that. So, Melissa told me that they now do photographs there. So I guess it's something that they didn't have before. I don't know. I, don't know much on it. Paul says he'll talk to Melissa on Wednesday and get all the details worked out with her on for sure if the photographer will be there on Friday. And so it will be me, Paul, Cheryl, and Melissa's godmother will go and visit her. And then Paul and Cheryl will get their very first picture taken with Melissa since she's been in prison. She's been in prison for 9 years. So that will be emotional. Paul, and he was supposed to be with me. He really wants to do a live with me here because he really wants to speak on families' abuse of taking money when they have a family member in prison. He's been so affected by hearing what's happening in the Avery case, and he really wants to speak out on that. But it's hard to get schedules to match up that he can do it. So, or that we can do it together, because a lot of times I have to go to him and he lives about an hour from me. So, yeah. So, they're sad going into the holidays that Melissa's still in prison. But they're doing the best they can. Christy is looking into the information on the bankruptcy, saying the house was bought in 2007. The bankruptcy was filed in 2010. The house has a mortgage. No one gave them a free house. They paid $195,000 for the house, and their mortgage payments are $2,045. Holy shit. Lindsay says, hey, I'm new to the page and the group and my first live. Sounds a rude question, but what relation to the case, Stephen, are you? And are you a loyal supporter? So my name is Jax West. I am not a family member. I am no relation to Stephen. I own the Stephen Avery Project, and I am just a supporter. And I talk to Stephen on occasion. That's it. I have no connection to the family, and quite frankly, I don't like most of the family, and they don't like me. So if you're here looking for a family connection, Stephen Avery Project and MAM Gossip is not the place. We support Stephen. Tommy says, any idea how she knows who bought the battery? Because batteries have a serial number on it and you can trace. So, and especially if it is from the Manitowoc Sheriff's Department, their auto department would have that in files. So Connie says, I think Scott Blodorn has talked to KZ. Knock on wood. Replies. Arlene says, Ryan erased messages that I'm sure were from Bobby, but Teresa's family was told to gain evidence against Stephen to keep him put away. I agree. And that's, so I truly think that the Scott Blodorn, Ryan Hilgas, and Mike Halbach connection is, you know, helping the sheriff's department get into that RAV4 and then having the fake search party find it on the salvage yard. And I believe they thought they were framing a guilty man, that they, you know, put yourself in their shoes, that their loved one is gone, and you have law enforcement telling you this stuff and you have no reason not to believe law enforcement. And I would want to make sure whoever murdered my loved one gets put away, and I wouldn't want his prior case used against in this one. So I don't have an issue with them doing what they did, but I do have an issue with them not coming forward now, because you're doing no service to Teresa by covering for her killer. Connie says she's trying to prove her loyalty to him and leaving things on speaker and so forth. Yeah, but Amy and I have, so, and I've told this story before, but I know people are new all the time. Amy was on Brendan's visitors list, and so was her daughter, Jessica. And so Amy would come to my house in Illinois. She lived in Michigan, would come to my house in Illinois and spend the weekend at my house, and then would go to visit Brendan from here in Wisconsin, because, you know, going around the lake and everything, it just made it easier for her to come here. And the prison's only like an hour and a half from me, right? An hour and a half? I can't remember. But not far. So, so Amy and Jessica were going to visit Brendan one weekend, and I went just for the ride. You know, that it was girls in the car and chatting and whatever, which is something too, because I used to speak to Brendan on the phone. And so Brendan knew during that visit I was going to be sitting out in the car. And so he had said to me, you know, what are you going to do while they're in here? And I said, I don't know, I'll read or, you know, be on the internet, take a nap. And I said, or I'll go for a walk. Because at that time I wasn't the big fat blob I am now, and I was actively exercising. And so Brendan had said, oh, you might not want to do that because the inmates will whistle at you. It's just cute and sweet. And then also a sweet part to that story is then when Amy came back out from her visit, she brought me a half-eaten bag of chili Fritos. And she said Brendan had told her to bring them out to me because he knew I was sitting out there and I'd be hungry. So that's sweet Brendan thinking of others. But anyway, so on the drive back to my house, Barb called And because now remember, November, they take off for November to go hunting the whole month. And so she was in her deer stand. And when you're hunting, you don't stay together with the other people. You're off in your own stand somewhere. So now she's far away from Scott. And so she called us, and it was on speakerphone because driving and everything, and both on the call. And she was telling us how she wants to leave Scott, and that she had talked to one of her sons, I can't remember which one, about moving in with them and to leave Scott. And and now I can't remember. Yeah. Was that might have been the very same weekend that then by Monday Scott had kicked me out of the group and had made all these nasty posts about Amy and I. My God, I really should look at that timeline, try and remember that, or maybe Amy can remember that. Arlene says, unless she did it and Bobby and Scott covered up and then everyone switched it to Stephen and made it East. Connie says, if the crime happened before marriage, that spousal law does not apply. Only info shared in the marriage is protected, and it depends on where the spouse learned the info. Interesting. Thank you, Connie. Connie continues and says, for instance, if they were in a public place where someone could have heard, the law does not apply. Chastity says, what does Scott do for a job again? This is new news to me. He works at a foundry. He still works at the same place he worked back then that has the smelter. He's at the same place. Oh, and somebody replied and told you that already. Kelly says, people file for bankruptcy all the time. I've seen wealthy people do it. It doesn't mean you don't have money available. Correct. Yes, I know. People looking to scam stuff. Debbie says, does anybody even know the bus driver's name? I've looked it up at one point because, I was just like, I want to try and find her because she testified. So if you go to StephenAveryCase.org and you look up testimony, you'll be able to find her name. I don't know. I want to say Jennifer or something, but I don't know. But it's in there. Julie says, I have a theory about the battery. I'm thinking the sheriff department has their own mechanic's garage, and the mechanic got a battery off a shelf for AC to use. That same mechanic has probably spoken to KZ. That's how KZ knows where it came from and who got it. I like that theory. Kelly said, Stephen said in an interview his mother dropped off his mail at 2:30-ish that day. Yeah. Just a problem I have with all of it, though, Kelly, is that because they kept questioning and wanting, stories to change, we've heard them say multiple different things. So it's so hard to know for sure what really happened that day. But yeah, I do recall it being said somewhere too that his mother drove her golf cart down there and brought him his mail. Sienna says, imagine having a son that you saw every day, shared lunch and dinner with, ripped from you not once but twice. My heart breaks for them. And there is such a bond between Stephen and his mom. I just, think of that. Stephen has basically been in prison since he was 22. He came home for 2 years out of that. Ugh. Trish says, the video game console should have a record of time of play. I know people have brought that up before. I don't know if that's something that KZ has looked at. Arlene says, Brendan's Vizio games were a handheld Nintendo. Oh, video games. It was nothing technical to give him knowledge. Okay. Connie says, Kim has always been supportive, yet she's quiet and sweet and stays in the background. Others run their mouth loud. Yeah. And Kim Ducat's sister is Sandra Morris, the cousin who kicked all this off from the start. That's her sister. Lori, currently it is now my time, 2:11 p.m. I'm still live, not Memorex. my God, I've been on here 1 hour and 9 minutes. Julie, in MAM2, Steven said he regretted suing for that much money. Did he? I don't recall that. Beverly, why didn't Steven ever write a book? Because he can't. For one, Steven doesn't like writing. So it would have to be one of those where they get a writer who sits down with him and discusses with him and records it and then writes it down and writes it for him. But second of all, is it the Son of Sam law? You're not allowed to make money off your crime, right? And then there's also Steven has a contract with Netflix that Netflix actually owns everything Steven Avery. So if Netflix wanted, they could go after the family for all of these GoFundMes and PayPals and selling Avery salvage yard stuff, all of that. Netflix could go after it all because they're not allowed to make money using anything from Steven's case to do so. So, and I know Netflix will assert it if they want, because I personally have been contacted by Netflix on a subject at one time, and they wanted to just make sure that there was no money being made off of what I had posted. And when they found out no money was being made, they gave me permission to use it. So all these fundraisers and stuff that's getting done are all in violation of Steven's contract with Netflix. So, but Netflix would have to do something about it. Will they? Well, they haven't so far. I will assume they know. I just find it very sad that people are trying to get rich off of other people's misery. So yeah, as of this time, Steven does not have the right to sell a book on his story. Netflix owns his story. Janet says, hope Steven doesn't give them a cent when he gets out. Amanda says, are Chuck and Earl supportive now? They seem positively involved in MAM too. They are supportive now. They haven't been in the past. They haven't been, they are. They haven't been, they are. So it flaps back and forth. Mandy says, Bev, I think he should write a book too. His family needs the money. Well, Ma and Pa do. Yeah, and I already said he can't. Joshua says, what kind of car at the time did Bobby drive? A Blazer. He had like 2 or 3 cars, though. Bobby did. But the Blazer is the car he drove that day. Lori said, why did Barb try to clean the computer drive? Her excuse is that it was just slow. And so that she was just trying to get her computer faster, that she also claims didn't have internet. So I don't know. Lonnie says that would be motive. Kids didn't want to get rid of the van so they could use it. What if Bobby was trying to get the photos deleted that she took and went south from there? That's another idea. Replies. Marielle says, do you think Barb's life is in danger now? No, I do not. I don't think she's in danger at all. I think that phone call she had with Steven where she was saying if Zellner doesn't stop, you'll have a dead sister, is just her preying on Steven's sympathies. Because Steven and I have talked on the phone about the awful things his family has done. And he knows what his family has done and continue to do. But then he'll say, but they're my family. So they all know, bottom line is, he's going to say blood is blood. So I think Barb was trying to manipulate Steven by doing if you don't stop, you'll have a dead sister. I don't think she truly meant she was going to kill herself or somebody's going to kill her. I think she's trying to manipulate him. Laura says, regarding Barb, her reaction when she goes into the interrogation room and Brendan tells her they got into his head tells me she knew at that point. To me, I saw her reaction as, oh shit, what do I do now? Rather than wanting to protect her kid. I could see where you could think that. Barb loves her boys. And so my opinion is, I don't think at that time that she knew anything. And that when Brendan would say that he was involved, then she'd be mad at Steven and totally believe what Brendan just said. And then when Brendan would say, they got into my head, then she's upset and she's mad at the cops for, what did you do? You made him say this, and Steven is innocent. So I think she just takes what her boys say at face value. Julie says, let me know later regarding the sweaty sweatshirt idea. Message me when you get a chance. I'm still waiting for the high res. Did you send me the high res sketch? Because I remember an email saying that he was going to send it, but did that get forwarded and I just missed that? So that's what I've been waiting on, Julie. Katya says, how long has Kathleen worked with Melissa's case? I'm really bad with numbers. I want to say 2012. I want to say 2012. So, but that's why if you're on Twitter and you see all of Kathleen's tweets, she @s Erin Moriarty. Erin Moriarty is from the CBS show 48 Hours, who covers Melissa's case. So 48 Hours did 2 episodes. One was called Blaming Melissa, and the other is called The Fight for Melissa. One was a couple years after the first update of it. And when it went to court last year, or this summer, this past summer, I think it was, Erin Moriarty flew in for that and was at that hearing. And you know, she hasn't done an episode on it or anything that she was there, but like, you know, so we were sitting in the courthouse before everything started, and all of a sudden you see Kathleen walking up and there's cameras in front of her walking backward, and it was 48 Hours filming Kathleen from start to finish of that day at that hearing. And I have some pictures from that, because like I even had Paul Kaluzinski get a picture with Erin Moriarty, because she's been a big champion for Melissa's case. Lindsay, I care who knows who. All I care about is how something so corrupt can go on within Wisconsin, and the law, whether directly involved or not, they're supporting it. Being from the UK, I know we have corrupt cops, but normally there is some good law enforcement that pick up on what is going on. Yeah, Lindsay, over in the UK, you guys have things in place that, especially in Brendan's case, you know, you can't do to juveniles what is done here. And we really need reform here and follow some of what the UK does. Francis says, this might be a dumb question, but if Bobby and Scott did this, was the police department involved from the beginning, or do you think that they just seen that as a way out of the lawsuit against the county? I personally think they saw it as a way out of their lawsuit. I do not think they were a part of that, like, you know, Scott and Bobby weren't hired or any of that. I don't believe that at all. I do know people have theories that way too, but just for me, I think law enforcement first started out with, we're going to frame this guilty man because he's going to get off because of how we screwed him last time. And then they didn't even attempt to find the real killer. And I think they probably know by this point that Stephen is innocent, but they're okay with it. Lori says, so Barb may have known who the actual killer is, but sacrificed Stephen and Brendan to cover for the real killers. Yeah, I think that is an option that Stephen, she didn't care about. Even though I do think Barb, out of the siblings and extended family, was the only one that cared about Stephen. She did go visit him. You can see when you look at visitors logs, she went and visited Stephen prior to making a murderer. The other family, no. They only showed up once there was fame and fortune to be had. But so I give Barb that benefit of the doubt that I think I really just don't want to believe that she knew while Brendan was going through all these court proceedings and everything that Bobby really did this. I really think that Barb was just living in ignorance. Looking the other way, won't see any of her boys as doing it. But I think she's got to know now. She may be telling herself to not believe it, but she's got to be having questions. Francis says, Amanda, that's what I mean. I feel like maybe they just found it and seen it as an opportunity. John says, if, and I hope they do, Stephen and Brendan get freedom, would they be able to live back in their own town, or would it be better for them to start a fresh life elsewhere? Well, you want to go, after being screwed over twice, there's no way they would do it third time, right? But you can't believe they would do it a second time and get away with it. But there is no way either one of those guys are going to leave their moms. So if Barb or Dolores won't leave Wisconsin, then their son won't either. Stephen just wants to be home with his parents and to live out the rest of their days together. So, but hopefully they'll find a place that, even if they still remain in Wisconsin, they buy someplace that nobody, the public doesn't know about. So they just want to be private people. So I think it would be in their best interest to start somewhere fresh, but I understand that you live where you live and you don't want to go elsewhere. I've lived in the same county my entire life. I graduated the same high school my parents did, and my son graduated from that high school as well. So, I get the whole planting your roots and staying there. Jenny says, for a long time, I thought Ryan and Mike were involved because of the cockiness and smirks on their faces. Oh my gosh, that startled me. Now I realize how the sheriff department played them by involving them, by allowing them to arrange the search and Pam to find the car. At their age at the time, I can imagine how important they felt being given information and responsibility. Sheriff department played them also. Yeah, I believe that too. Katya says, Stephen is one strong man. Many would have given up already. And he's always so positive. Every time I talk to Stephen, he's just got a positive mindset. Julie says, yep, he was being interviewed. Real quick blurb about it. Kimberly says, a ghostwriter. Yeah, that's what Stephen would need. But again, he can't sell his story at this time. Julie says, wish I could remember what episode in which season. Lisa says, coming in late here, did KZ make her announcement yet? It was, KZ did a live Q&A yesterday on her Twitter page that she's done once before. And so first she gave out 19 things that she's learned of the case. And we have the screenshots of those posted. So you can find them here in Gossip on what they all are. And then she allowed people to have Q&A And those screenshots are posted here too. So there was no big announcement. It was just a Q&A and what she's thinking of the case. Janet says, does Chuck and Earl talk to Barb? Yeah, I believe they do. Rebecca says, how long ago did Bobby have his blazer crushed? I don't recall. I remember people saying he did, but I don't know. Somebody else may know that. If you know, post it in here. Julie says, a computer can never have its hard drive completely wiped clean. Only way to do that is to replace the entire hard drive. Yeah, and Barb wouldn't know that, and Brad would. I don't know why Brad didn't tell her that, or if Brad just didn't care then. John, I'll get that hat back on. Julie, when all this is all said and done, Steven is free. Netflix may do a full-fledged life story of him. To be honest, his life story is remarkable. Yeah. I mean, it's his story. It's a comedy in it. Well, it's not even a comedy. I was going to say a comedy in a tragedy. You know, that whole thing of going, yay, he's free, and, you know, got a girlfriend, and, you know, he's going to come into money and all that, and then to be taken away again. Plus, losing his kids, you know, and it's something when I talk to Steven, you know, he really hates that he lost out on being a father. Really wants a family. And his twin boys were like a week old when the Penny Bernstein thing happened. You know, so he didn't even get to know his kids. Yeah, it's a horrible story. Oh, okay, you're still waiting too for that. Yeah, so yeah, once you get that, then we'll move forward on it, Julie. Beverly says, where is Jody now? I heard she recently got another DUI. So I don't know if she's in jail or what. How many DUIs should somebody be allowed to get, truly? Because, you know, drinking and driving, you could kill somebody. You know, go ahead and kill yourself if you want to. You kill innocent people. You know, so how many breaks do you get driving drunk? Lonnie said, I thought I heard a while back that Law and Order was going to do an episode based on Steven Avery. Was I dreaming? I wouldn't be surprised, because isn't their thing ripped from the headlines? So, yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if Law and Order did something that used that storyline. Arlene says, the Fairy Princess was out in 8 years, and that was brutal. If you come to Wisconsin and the cheese don't kill you, the Fairy Princess will. Arlene, every time I go to Wisconsin, I stop at the Mars Cheese Castle. Because going up to Manitowoc, it's, you know, all along, you know, the Lake Michigan side. And so Mars Cheese Castle. Yep. You have to load up, and I get my fresh cheese curds and everything. Dairy Princess. Greg, thanks for all the info from a little town in Missouri that has its share of corruption. Yeah, from my not so little suburb of Chicago, where lots of corruption, and also, yeah, being right here in Chicago, is that the corruption capital of the world? Jenny, they should move to Australia. Our legal system is 110% better. Yeah, one of the moderators for Steven Avery Project is from Australia. So yeah. Kim, your dog is photobombing you. Think he may need to go potty. Oh, if they need to go to the bathroom, they'll either go by the door right here or they go right at me. But that's, yeah. Trish says, Jody just was picked up again for drunk driving in Green Bay just last month. Look it up on CCAP. Debbie says, my heart aches for Steven when his parents go. Well, and that's something that Melissa just dealt with in the last year. Both of her grandmas died. So that upset her a lot, that, you know, she really wanted to be home to spend some time with her grandmas. And so both her mom's mom and her dad's mom passed away this year. And Stephen is so close to his mom and dad. Oh. Julie says, I should have said Stephen's regret for the amount of lawsuit. Quick blurb, can't recall when. Heather said, or Jody, the family has to be freaking out. Lori says, praying for Stephen and Brendan's freedom and praying the real killers are exposed so Teresa can finally rest in peace. Also praying for Ma and Pa Avery. Well, and that's something that Stephen brings up, and we mention here too, is that nobody wants Teresa to be forgotten. And that is the thing at the core of all of this, is that a woman lost her life. And people are manipulating that in this way and that way for their own personal gain. And so at the end of the day, she's gone and her family lost her. You know, so why people don't care enough to find out what really happened to her is a travesty. Greg says, you think the judge could be held accountable because of the way the prosecutor did things? The judge had to know all the lies, BS. He allowed the prosecutor to run wild, didn't he? The judge should have seen all the entrapment and how everything just happened. Very unbelievable. That's something one of Brendan's lawyers said when I went and saw them speak a couple years ago, about how nobody does that. Nobody holds that press conference and says the things that Sweaty Sweat did to tell that sick, sordid story that he's just gotten his fantasies. The things these judges allowed and then didn't allow, you know, so like the judge wouldn't allow any other suspects. You can't name another suspect unless you have a motive. But yet they have no motive for why Stephen did this. Why is it okay for there to be no motive for Stephen, yet you have to prove a motive for any other reasonable suspect? Ugh. They all suck. Jules says, dude, how many DUIs has Jody had? Isn't that guaranteed prison time, right? I don't get it. How many times does she get to just drive drunk and possibly kill somebody? Julie says, I'd love to take the ferry across from Michigan. That's what Amy used to do, take the ferry over when she would go and visit Barb. Paul, bring them here. I shall bring some bunning snags. What's that? Jenny, I'd love to see Brendan hypnotized and taken back to that day. So curious if Brendan overheard Scott and Bobby discussing what they were going to do. Well, we all know from his coerced confession that he's extremely suggestible. So if anybody was to do some kind of hypnotism thing with him, you would for sure have to have somebody that's on the up and up, because it's obviously really easy to get Brendan to say things that he didn't do. Beverly says, what was the situation with Teresa's family giving up on the civil suit? They were trying to block him from getting money from his wrongful conviction and being able to get himself a good attorney. So they wanted to make sure that if he came into a bunch of money, they'd get it instead. They wanted to make sure he didn't have legal representation. And then once he settled and he wasn't going to get that money, they dropped it. So that's that. Chrissy says, how are Steve's mom feeling after her surgery, and how is dad dealing with this? Dolores does better and better each day. She really wants to just relax at home. Alan does his own thing up in Crivets. They just live their quiet lives when allowed to, and hope for Stephen's release. Stormy says, how can we find Melissa's story? You can look up on YouTube the Blaming Melissa and the Fight for Melissa that 48 Hours has up on YouTube. And then she's got a Facebook group called the official Melissa Kaluzinski Facebook page. And for Heather asking who is Melissa, Melissa Kaluzinski is another one of Kathleen Zellner's clients that I advocate for, who's in prison for a murder she didn't commit. She was 22 and has a low IQ like Brendan, and was interrogated for hours and hours and hours until they said, just say it's an accident and everything will be fine. And she's been in prison ever since. And Kathleen is trying to get her a new trial and get her free. Bunning Snags, New Age Australian delicacy. Uh-oh, the word delicacy is scary to me. I am a very picky, boring eater. Thank you, Christy, for giving them the links on Melissa. Michelle says, hey, Jax, Hallbacks dropped the lawsuit only when MAM 1 came out. It was still active until then. Was it really? Interesting. So did they get paid from Netflix? Dun, dun, dun. Shannon says, is Teresa's family just ignoring all the evidence? Don't know. They stay very quiet and private, so we don't know them. So, I can't assume. Well, I can assume. I don't want to assume why they do or don't do what they do. The only thing that I can possibly think of is that they believe in their law enforcement and judicial system and just believe what they're being told, So, but for me personally, if this was my family, I would want to know the truth and I would be looking at everything. And you can't have a rational brain and look at all the evidence there is in this case and come away with Stephen and Brendan are guilty. So I'm going to guess they don't even look because they just believe that none of this is true. Stephen and Brendan are guilty. It's done and over with. And they just want to move on. John says, my son Jack wants to know who is watching with me. Do you believe that what Kathleen put out yesterday is going to be worrying the police now and maybe think the truth is about to come out? Well, I think everything that Kathleen puts out scares the guilty parties. So why else did they get Bobby's computer again a year ago, last November? That they took the computer again after Kathleen brought it up in a filing. So I think they absolutely get worried when Kathleen releases stuff. They know she's got stuff and she gets closer and closer to the truth. Amy says, just watch Dream Killer, another of KZ's clients. Definitely gives me hope that she can free Stephen. So much corruption and takes way too long to get justice. Yeah, I recommend people watch Dream Killer, the Ryan Ferguson story. And I dare you to watch that and not fall in love with Bill Ferguson. That's the way a family member of the wrongfully convicted should behave. That man is just a great man. And his fight for his son, it's just so sweet. And yeah, thanks to Kathleen, Ryan is free. Sharon said, I watched Melissa's dad do a video and it broke my heart hearing all the emotions in his voice. Heartbreaking. Yeah, Paul calls me a bunch of times a day, and there are times that he breaks down on the phone, and it's really hard. And we're coming. Halloween is a special holiday for Paul and Melissa. They're so into scary movies and such. And so, like, even the last time we went and visited Melissa, Melissa's talking about pranks her dad has done to her, you know, when she was little to scare her. And, you know, Paul and Melissa have such a bond, and the holidays are so hard. And Cheryl as well, Melissa's mom. You know, Melissa's mom is somebody who she doesn't want to be on camera ever. Never. Don't, you know. So you do get to see Cheryl some in the 48 Hours episodes, which is like, oh, there's, you know, where's Waldo? There's Cheryl, because she wants no part of it, you know, of any of this stuff. She, you know, she just wants her daughter home. And it's really heartbreaking. Or then another one of Kathleen's clients that I also advocate for, Kent Pellegrini. And so Kent will call me and tell me something he wants me to post on his Facebook page to say to his supporters and everything. Or Kent will tell me he wants me, you know, like for Father's Day, can you, you know, post this picture of me and my dad and say something to my dad. But it's no matter what post I make on Justice for Kent, his dad will always comment and just go, soon, son, soon. And it's just so sad to see good family of what happens to them when their family are wrongfully imprisoned. Julie says, Tim Hallbach was a new lawyer with a new firm. He orchestrated the civil suit. Now he is higher up in the government law chain of command, and who knows what he will do once Stephen is out. It's going to get ugly before it gets better, I'm afraid. So wrong. Hi, Jean. Hi, Jean. We've got 15 more minutes. Jenny says, I believe as long as a real killer is found, Tim Hallbach will leave Stephen alone once he is free. That's a good point. You would hope they will let it go when they see without a doubt that Stephen is innocent and Bobby is guilty. And before guilters want to use this video for something and go, Stephen was found guilty beyond a shadow of a doubt because a jury found him not guilty, I'm going to be blunt and I'm going to be mean here. Fuck your juries. Has anybody on here ever served in a jury? I've served on a jury, and it was a bunch of bullshit. And people were going to let this guy walk who was clearly guilty. We had him on video. We had him on audio. The guy was guilty. And it was not a murder case. But he was being charged with possession of an illegal narcotic with intent to deliver. A drug dealer selling a whole brick of cocaine that we even passed around the jury room. Look at this real cocaine. It's weird. Why are we passing around this cocaine? Why do we need to see the cocaine close up like that? But anyway, legal definition of the word possession means you have complete control over the item. Well, this was a police sting operation that, so an undercover agent was organizing the buy of this cocaine. And so now when this deal was going down in a parking lot, there's law enforcement that was like at all the exits of this parking lot. So no matter what, this guy wasn't going to be able to leave with this cocaine. So we had one guy in the jury who said not guilty, because if the guy had decided, I don't want to sell this cocaine to you and go home, he wouldn't have been able to, that he would have been stopped. Therefore, he didn't have legal possession of it. We were in the jury room for 2.5 days arguing about it, because also there were people that wanted to drag it out because they bring you food. So here's your sandwiches for lunch, here's your pizza for dinner. And so I was literally in that jury room hitting my head on the table saying to the guy, you are a fucking idiot. Stupid. So just because you're selected for a jury does not mean you know better than anybody else. Also, and my dog always likes to bark at trucks when they drive past. Also, jury is not educated. There's so much that actually happens in cases that get suppressed and they don't get to see. So they don't have all the evidence. They don't have all the facts. So I could care less if a jury finds somebody innocent or guilty. I care what the actual proof shows. And then we know Stephen's jury was fixed with people who worked for the Manitowoc Sheriff's Department. We're on that jury. So a jury saying guilty does not mean you're guilty, because the facts don't match up. Gemma says, is Dream Killer on Netflix? No, it's on the ID channel on demand, I believe, is where you can find it. John says, exactly true about the police. Been worried. Just hope that Kratz gets what is coming to him. I do too. Shannon says, okay, the female juror who is also walking Stephen out of the courtroom, one, is a huge conflict of interest, in the fact she was even on the jury, I thought was against the law. Wait, you're confusing that picture. The guy in that picture, it's his father, who is the community service officer in the second picture that I posted. She was not, that officer was not a juror. But there is a female, was there a female or a male juror who was married to somebody who was. And then two, your other things is two, that female police officer looks like the same lady who was on the Avery property who said the trailer was super clean. No, that's not Wendy Baldwin. So yeah, no, the pictures that I posted today, it's the man that's on Stephen's left. That's Carl Wardman or Wordsman, whatever his name is, son. So Carl Wordsman is when to the right of the car in that picture, that man was on Stephen's jury and was there to be from the start, to just stay with, he's guilty, he's guilty, he's guilty. He also discussed in that jury room with the juror, Kratz's press conference, when he talked about his sexual perverted fantasies that he now wanted to put on Brendan and say, these are the things that Brendan said happened. So, and then if you recall, Brendan was not used in prosecuting Stephen. Stephen was not prosecuted. They did not charge him with rape, because the only rape in the scenario comes out of Brendan's mouth. And there's no proof that Teresa was raped. There's nothing to say that she was raped, except for what the Fassbender and Wiegert made Brendan say. So, and then they knew they couldn't use Brendan in Stephen's trial because now Brendan had recanted it all. And so he was not a reliable witness. So, but no, again, Shannon, so that those pictures posted is because of the guy, Wardman. Jean says, does Brendan know that people think Bobby perpetrated the crime? Yeah. But Barb just has him parrot that his brother didn't do it. So he knows, but Brendan's only going to think what his mom tells him to think. Michelle says, it was in no way beyond a shadow of a doubt. Right. Michelle says, there was so much reasonable doubt in Stephen's case. I do not know how they could have found him guilty, because they had a bully in the jury pool, because there were people that wanted to vote not guilty. And Wardman, whatever his name is, would have none of it. They were guilty. So that's why they compromised and voted guilty on killing her, not guilty on mutilation of a corpse. So that doesn't make any sense, right? Because the only evidence that you have allegedly that she was killed is this mutilation of a corpse. But then you're saying Stephen didn't mutilate the corpse. So if you have no mutilated corpse, then how is there even a crime? So the people that wanted to vote not guilty did this compromise because they were hoping the court would be sane and know that this means this is a mistrial. There's no way you can vote guilty one way and not guilty the other. Michelle says, I cannot wait until KZ proves Bobby is guilty. Free Stephen Avery, free Brendan Dassey. John says, thanks, Jax, for answering my questions tonight. I thought, let's watch 5 minutes, and nearly 2 hours later, still sat here. If to raise a Guinness to Stephen, let Stephen out. Yeah, we typically, when I do this, I last 2 hours. I've gone longer, but I'm like 2 hours seems to be the window, so I have to cut myself off at 2 hours. Or if I get through the questions quicker, I'll end quicker. It all depends on what you guys have posted and then how long I'm going to ramble about this stuff. Sharon says, Kratz did an interview yesterday. Yeah, I listened. Saying how offended he was over the supporters and how they treat him. Well, I was offended when he violated Stephen and Brendan, was gobsmacked. Yeah, so he talked about in that interview yesterday how somebody from this very group posted the picture of Kratz's house. All right. So first of all, that's not illegal. You can post a picture of somebody's house. You could Google his house, right? You can Google where does Ken Kratz live, and it's going to tell you where he lives. You can Google Earth and find his house. I know I've done it before. Somebody's comment on there was, let's bomb it, or something like that they had said. Something about bombing his house. Now, one of the moderators here, when they saw that, they deleted that comment because it's not an appropriate thing to say. We know the person who made that comment. We're sure they didn't mean they're going to bomb it. It's not a real threat, but we do understand how things like that have to be taken seriously. The guilters got that screenshot, since they're in here right now watching too, because they have nothing better to do than to come in here and, they feel that Stephen is guilty, but they have to watch what the innocent people say and then take it back to their little teeny tiny little group and then make fun of me and all of you. So the guilters took that screenshot and then reported it. And so the person who posted the picture, the cops showed up at their house. Pathetic. Because, again, posting a picture of somebody's house, especially a public figure like Ken Kratz is, it's something I have always said. I have had websites and forums since the year 2000. I have had forums that were really big, that we had a lot to moderate, that I had people from TV shows, what are you guys doing? On there, okay? My rule has always been, since 2000, you can talk shit about the people on the shows, the people who are putting themselves out there in the limelight. Criticism comes with that. You can't expect all you're going to get is love. Just me, myself. I'm here doing these Facebook Lives. So sure, I'm putting myself out there for people to go, oh, look, she's got a big zit here on her face. and she's fat and she's ugly and blah, 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 blah. Well, I'm putting myself on here, so I'm subjecting myself to that, just like people who will say, love you, Jax, love what you're doing. Good comes with the bad. You can't have only one, right? So the only thing I say is I don't want you guys who are posting here when you disagree with one another to then start calling each other idiots or any of that. Be respectful of one another, because you can have different opinions without attacking each other, because not everybody is like me, that if you call me, well, I won't say the words because people will be offended. I'm not offended by language. They call me names all the time. Doesn't bother me. Doesn't offend me. I don't get all worked up over it, but other people do. And I don't want people's feelings hurt or to feel bullied. Kratz is selling himself everywhere he can. And he's the one, when he was hitting on poor, abused women, was telling them, I am the prize. I am the one with the $200,000 house. So if you're going to brag about your house so you can rape women, and don't get it twisted, he raped women. These women were having sex with him not of their own free choice, but because he was telling them he wasn't going to help their case or their boyfriend or husband or partner's case unless they did as they told by him. He's a raper. I'm not a raper. He's a raper. So when you put yourself out there, bad comes with the good. So I'm not cool with death threats, even to Kratz. You know, don't contact him and tell him you're going to kill him. That's stupid. But he deserves the criticism. So you can't pick and choose how people are going to feel about you. They have a right to their opinion of you. People have a right to hate me, and they can like me. Whichever way, I'm still going to be me and still going to do what I do. So it was laughable. I listened to that interview of him wanting to whine about it, especially when he wants to talk about his wife like she's some poor victim. Because if you see the hateful, disgusting stuff that woman tweets, oh, she doesn't have a leg to stand on. Fuck her. Sorry, there's the language. And Greg says, who has her car right now? And when they get out, will Mr. Stevens still be awarded the money from the first lawsuit? Her car is in storage through Manitowoc Sheriff's Department, right? Or is it in Calumet? Stevens' first lawsuit is done. There's nothing he can do about that. He settled. Stormy says, can they not put a gag order on him? I don't think you want a gag order on him because he just digs his hole deeper. Darren, hi, new member from UK. Do we know if the swab from the hood latch was tested for residue from latch? As it's been suggested, if swabs were swapped for hospital ones, then that swab would only contain DNA and no other residue, such as metal, grease, dirt. Kathleen doesn't have any access to it. And I think String and Buting really dropped the ball on a lot of stuff. Heather said, okay, I missed out on an hour of this with no service. Anything new you said? No, nothing new, Heather, just me. I'm answering everybody's questions, and we're at 3 o'clock now, so I'm just scanning through these last couple of ones that are down here right now before I end it. And once I end it, it remains on the page that you can go back and watch from the start. John says, what did you think about the banner over there with Free Steve Avery on the football match? I thought it was awesome. It is so great to see the support that Stephen has from all around the world, and I know Stephen will appreciate that. Michelle says, thanks so much for this group and these chats. We all need a place to vent and talk about all of this. Without you, I think it would go totally nuts. Well, thank you for being here, because without you, there's no reason to be here. Jules says, what do you think about Culhane lying and tampering with his blood? Dan Cassidy, no hat denied. Yeah, maybe before I end this, I'll run upstairs and get my Mad Hatter hat for you guys, right? You got to remember Culhane was also involved in Stephen's first case. So she purposely sat on the DNA. She was told that this DNA now needed to be tested in the Penny Bernstein case. And so she sat on it. They all sat on it for extra months, made Stephen sit there for months. Sherry is so in on all of this, you know, and she contaminated evidence. She's horrible. All right, so I'm down to the bottom of it. Paul's calling me again. I'm going to deny his call. I'll run upstairs real quick and get my hat. Talk amongst yourselves. I'll be right back. Oh, does that mean I'll be killed? There, Dan. Happy? Here's my Mad Hatter hat. Quite fancy, huh? Greg, thanks for all the info. Once again, the vial with blood in it has a little hole on top. How did that hole get there? Greg, that is typical when you use those vacutainers. That's another video I actually did to show you that. And I still have the container somewhere. Maybe next live I'll get that. Yeah, so I did a video test of that, and that hole would be there. There's nothing shady about the hole on the top of that vacutainer, or however, whatever you call that. Andrea, cute dog, what kind? And you got a mean head in your window. I have 3 dogs. Big one, Mallory, is a pit bull mix. Medium one, Mickey, is a Chihuahua mix. And the little one is another Chihuahua mix. They're all rescues, so I don't know all of what they are. Jules says, I think Culhane might be the key to this whole thing. Yeah, she's somebody else if they could get to talk. Michelle says, this is the same as in 85. They decided to pin it on Stephen and had tunnel vision. Never bothered to look into any other suspects. They wanted Stephen. Yes. Stormy says, how does the victim of the first crime Stephen did not do feel about this crime? Does she feel he's guilty? Yeah, I was really disappointed in Penny Bernstein that she went immediately to saying Stephen was guilty. I don't know why you would do that without looking at the evidence, but she did. And I find that repulsive. Give us a song. Oh yeah, no, I'm not singing. But Dan Cassidy is on here right now, and he's actually a singer of several bands. So Dan, give us a song. John asks, has it snowed? Yes, it is snowed here, but I don't have any accumulation here. I don't think you can see out my windows. It just looks really bright. I don't have any accumulation here, but Northern Illinois does. Danielle, so the hood latch was cleaned by the person who changed battery and then planted Steven's DNA on it. Yes. Thank you for the hat. I have a whole Mad Hatter outfit because I'm supposed to be doing a Mad Hatter tea party. Just haven't planned that out yet. Greg says, hey, let Steven know you can come down here to Missouri. 3 salvage yard for sale around my area. Yeah, Steven just wants to go off and fish and garden and work on cars. Oh, yeah, and that in my window, that's because I used to run a haunted house. And that's a Halloween decoration. And people were so like offended by that and bothered by those that they tried to make it so you couldn't buy them anymore. So of course I bought one and it's been in my window ever since. Greg says, you think they'll make a movie out of this when it's all over? Absolutely. I'm sure. Oh, Christy, you were so coming for that. Yeah. Come to my Mad Hatter party. Actually have a party next week, but no costume involved. And then we have a party in December that we're doing that we've got a theme for. So come to Illinois, Christy. So, all right, we're at 3:07. I'm down at the end of all this stuff. So I'm going to let you guys go. I don't know when I will be live next. You never know. I tried to give you somewhat of a warning, at least a day's notice, unless something big happens and I hop on to then talk about it, because it's so much easier now for me to just talk than to type it all up. I also have tickets for Brendan's Lawyer, String and Beauty. Nye Ryder and Drizzen are doing an event on December 1st at the House of Blues here in Chicago, and I have tickets for that. So I'll be going to that, and then I will let you guys all know what happens there too. So, all right. Stormy says, can Steven or Brendan write a book or make money off the case? It will depend how all this ends up at the end, but currently they cannot. So, all right. I am out. I'm going to spend the rest of my Friday night laying around doing nothing, because I'm sure you can't tell, but I've got borderline migraine right now, believe it or not. I've got a really bad headache. So, all right, out. And there's my dogs wanting to go outside too. So thank you. Tip my hat to you.